Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Scared Confident. I'm Kyle Lacy, kind of your subject for this season. I'm going to give you, if this is the first time you're listening, which it might be, Robin, who's our guest, has a big following. And if he's sharing this, then we've got some new listeners here. But I'm going to give you just a little bit of context of what this all is. The premise is I went through what is called a fear interview a couple months ago. It's an interview that you do where you speak in third person as fear. The idea is that it kind of helps you fully understand how much fear controls your life. And many of us don't really know, right? And kind of take back control from the narrative. And I had more than I thought I did going through my head. And one of the examples from one of the interviews, this is just a quote that I said as I was re-listening to it. I think fear is telling me what will happen when all these people that seek my advice or work with me find out that I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm Kyle Lacy, and this is my fear journey. I have a lot of respect for Robin Daniels in his career and as well as how he shows up on at least digital media and our conversations I've had with him one-on-one outside of this interview. He has an optimism and a positivity that I feel like only somebody that lives in Copenhagen can have or is from Denmark. But I just have a lot of respect for it. And somebody that is that optimistic, I just wanted to talk to him about fear of failure as, he has been at the top seat of the CMO at public companies, and he's had leadership roles at pretty much every cool software company. But he was a CMO at WeWork. I think he's had leadership roles at LinkedIn. He's just had a lot of experience at a very high level. Here's my conversation with my friend Robin Daniels on how he tackled fear or tackles fear. And the first step was buying a one-way ticket to San Francisco.
I've been in marketing basically for the last 20 plus years or so. High tech marketing. When I was 21, I bought a one-way ticket from Copenhagen, Denmark, where I was born and raised, to Silicon Valley because I always wanted to go and live the dream of being over there. And I always had this one driving thought in my head is I didn't want to look back on my life when I was 50, 60, 70 years old and have thought to myself, I would have, I could have, I should have, if only I'd been more brave, if only I had taken the chance. So I always had this driving thought. So when I was 21, I bought this one-way ticket to California. And I've been there since 2000 to 2020. And just last year, I moved back to Copenhagen, Denmark. So that's where I am right now after 20 years in Silicon Valley. It's been an amazing ride. And just to cut a long story short, I've worked for some companies that you've never heard of that crash and burn. It's kind of like the experience you get when you're taking some chances. And I've worked for some companies, thank God, that have done really well, partly because of the product, the company, the leadership, and hopefully also by me being involved with it. Salesforce, Box, Matterport, recently went public this summer, which was an incredible experience. LinkedIn. I was also at WeWork, where I was the CMO for a while. That I left there over 2 years ago, but that recently went public as well, which is great. So it's just like, you never quite know, but you just kind of, you trust your gut. You get better as you get older at trusting your gut and not letting fear stand in your way, but it's always there, So now I'm back in Copenhagen. I just left Matterport recently, just about a month ago.
So that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you, other than I just enjoy talking to you in general. You bought a one-way ticket to California. How do you think about fear? And maybe take me back to when you bought that one-way ticket. Like what
Yeah.
was there any fear? Because it seems like you just go do it and
Yeah, I mean,
move
it
on.
seems like probably on the surface, but since this is about fear and overcoming fear or how you deal with it, it's always there. I mean, even for me, there's many times where I've thought I don't have the skills, I don't have the experience, I don't have maybe even the knowledge and so on to succeed in any given job. But then I think to myself, the best I can do is just try. And it was the same when I bought that one-way ticket. I didn't have the experience. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to stay. I didn't know a single person. I'd never been to California in my life. I just, again, thought, well, I don't want to look back again on my life and have the regret of not daring or not having the courage to try. And it feels like it's been a theme for me throughout the last 20 years. I've worked in many companies where, honestly, I've so many times been in meetings where I've looked around the room and thought to myself, and I feel blessed to be surrounded by these people who are literally the best of the best. And it's been in so many of the companies I've been at. And sometimes that then introduces itself as kind of this imposter syndrome of, if they only find out that I don't really know what I'm doing, maybe I'll get find out and I'll get shown the door. And so it's certainly shown itself many times. I remember especially at LinkedIn, actually, when I worked there for a few years, it was interesting because they had such a high bar for their hiring and their educational background. I'm like, I don't have a higher education. Don't have an MBA. I didn't go to Harvard or Stanford or any of these top schools. I went to a school that nobody ever heard of in Denmark. It's not even a higher educational school. It's just kind of like an average, mediocre school. And here, yet I am surrounded by these people. I feel both blessed, but I also feel like, well, what happens if they find out, a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's also when I think I feel like I've gotten better in my life to know what my strengths and weaknesses are. If I think about just a pure raw skill of marketing, which is what my domain is, I wouldn't say I'm the best at marketing. There are many big people who are better at marketing than me when it comes to probably, let's say, brand marketing, communications, revenue marketing, all kinds of things. But I think my superpower is that I'm really good at seeing the fuller picture, like getting all of these different parts of marketing to row in the same direction and to be focused on a unified goal. And then my superpower is really about motivating people and getting the best out of people, taking chances on the skills that people might have or the aptitude. And that's a superpower in itself, And so realizing that, it took me a while, because there's many times when I wasn't a leader and you're sitting there just with your pure raw skills and you're like, how do I fit in with this group of superstars? And that's always incumbent. As I've gotten more confident in my ability, it's easier, I think, a little bit to throw that voice out, but it's always there. It's definitely a fear that I've had in my career, and even now, when I get into, I try to dabble a little bit more with VCs and advisory work, investment work. Then I get into new territory. I've always been the kind of person that like, I like leaning into the unknown and into the fear, because that's the only way to grow. It's not always comfortable.
Yeah, no. Well, I think what's interesting is that I might be very fearful about the unknown and not fully uh, I maybe not fully believe in myself to get it done, but I am bored as hell if that's not there, right? So I seek out the unknown and the chaos, jumping into a VC firm or jumping in a leadership role I've never done, because if the opposite is actually worse. And as I've thought about this idea of imposter syndrome and failure, I actually didn't connect the two until I listened to my fear interview. And as we are talking, it's you might have your biggest fears might actually be the thing that drives you and makes you the happiest, which
That's
is
true. That's true.
which is crazy to actually think about. But so if you and one of the other things I've noticed from you following you, and it's
Yeah.
you have a positivity that I
Mm-hmm.
that I think is, well, unnatural for me. I am not as positive, but I think that also plays into it, right? When you're
It
thinking
does. It
about, I'm going
does.
to buy a one-way ticket to California, you're thinking of the positive things. I don't want the regret. I want to learn. I want to grow. I think that also plays into it, because if you're somebody that's more narcissistic, it's going to be harder for you to figure out, because if I'm buying a one-way ticket to Copenhagen, which I've only been once, right? I am thinking what all could go wrong.
Well, it's
So
interesting.
it's just interesting.
I mean, my uncle, he has this thing. He lives in Boston, and he's a great guy, and I'm really close to him and his two daughters. And he always said, there's some people who are born with the happy gene and some people who are not. And I think I am born with the happy gene, and he is too. That's why I think we're born. But I have two brothers, for example. They're not as happy as I am. They're not as optimistic as I am. I don't, and it's hard to say exactly where it comes from, because we all grew up with the same parents and everything else. But I think part of it is in the formative years of my life, I really had to kind of fight for to succeed in life in many ways. We grew up. My both my parents were these I would say spiritual teachers. They wrote books about spirituality, New Age, and so on. But so they were always honestly struggling financially, and also I think with some happiness issues for sure. The kind of like manic depressive in some ways, and I think looking at that definitely made me lean into the other direction of, I never wanted that in my life, just to be candid. I always wanted to be, I didn't have to, I could see how debilitating it was when you don't have freedom,
Mm.
and you're bound by, I would say, poverty, or by like the emotions, letting your emotions just kind of like control you in such an unhealthy way. And I always thought to myself, I'd rather just try to be as much in control as I can. That's not to say that doesn't affect me, but I'm always trying to think, well, I owe it to myself to try and work as hard as I can, because that's my skill: grit, determination, positivity, optimism. And again, I didn't come from a wealthy background. I didn't come from a great education, but if I can apply those things, then that becomes my superpower. And I've saw early in my life the impact that had on other people. Like, people wanted to be around me because I have so much energy. When I go into a room, I always like in some way give more energy to the room than if I'm not there. And I could see,
Yeah.
oh, this is a thing, right? And so even now, when it comes to work, that is what I bring to the table. It's like, I want every meeting, every interaction, every one-on-one that I have with somebody who works for me or a peer or whatever. I want the meeting to be better because I was in it. I want the one-on-one to be better because I was in it. And I've always had that mentality, and because that is what I bring to the table. And I saw that just early on, because I had to, like, you know, and my parents were off doing whatever they were doing, writing their books and taking care of themselves. There's always this weird thing in I think the spiritual community, where you're both focused on saying that you're for the world, but you're also a little bit narcissistic in a way, I
Right.
think, because you're trying to find
Yeah,
yourself, right? This is what spirituality is a lot about:
for
finding
sure.
yourself. So it's like you're left to fend for yourself as a kid, and that just taught me, being able to like go out there and having to learn how to deal with people, if for lack of a better word.
I think in general, it's just this idea that everybody has like some imposter syndrome. Like even, I mean, you're talking CMO, we were talking about crazy high growth chaos and all that stuff. Like, and he went for it. And I think we talked in the interview about how he used fear for the positive gains, right? Because he's more like cup all the way full. That was my main takeaway. I have always viewed fear and risk taking in more of the pessimistic standpoint. Like, you have to do it. You have to take risk in order to succeed. His comments, I think, kind of cater to, I get to take risk. I get to buy a one-way ticket to San Francisco. I get to make a speech in front of all of WeWork and eventually get the CMO role because of it. I get to do this and that. And him leaning in constantly. That was my main takeaway, is that you get to take the risk. So part of this process, you get to the end of this sphere interview, and he kind of walks me through, like, all right, so next time you hear that voice in your head, what are you going to say? And I think it's called a fear statement. And so I didn't like, the first words that came to my head were "fuck you," and but that just shows as we talk, it shows the difference between the two of us, because I would assume that your fear statement is probably a little bit more cheerful, and maybe, I mean, so what's interesting about this entire process is that my fear statement has changed as I have talked to people. I talked to my cousin earlier, who we lost his mom, my aunt, in May, and she was fundamental to our family. And my fear statement changed to, like, what would Wendy do? Like, what would she say? And now, as I talk to you, it's more, how would Wendy, how would Robin, how are the people that I know, how would they celebrate this decision that has to be made? Not necessarily the fact that fear you need to shut up, but the fact that fear, I know that you're false. How can I celebrate the fact that I'm moving into a job that's new to me? Moving or whatever major life change is going to on a daily basis. That when fear kind of decides to chat.
Well, it's a great example. I mean, I can imagine you being acquired by a bigger company. Probably a lot of fear, like what happens if they find out about my skills. To your point, right?
Yeah,
And what will happen because I'm based here, and what about my leadership, and what it's like all these things that always go through. Same, as I was just taking Matterport public. It's like, what if they just find out, that I'm not the right guy to do it? It's like, because you announce, I knew it was happening, then you announce it, and there's like 6 months, and you're like, you really want that experience, but what if they find out? Well, we can actually
yeah,
do better. It's like all this shit going on in your head. But I give you a really real example where also I think fear can be a great example, a great way to change your mind and see it from a different perspective. So I was my first CMO gig is many years ago. Um, and it was this small company. I joined as like employee number 8. It was all engineers, but we were building like a cybersecurity solution. And they called me kind of the near founder, but I wasn't the founder of the company. But I was the first business hire. It was all engineers. And I was there for just about 2.5 years. And we built up the company to about 10 million in ARR. Kind of, we were in stealth when I joined. We launched the company, hired a bunch of people. We raised about 50 million in funding, got to 10 million in ARR, got to about 120 people. But the last 6 months, honestly, I was pretty miserable there. And the reason I was miserable is because I did not love cybersecurity. It was just a drab to be in. You know me pretty well. I'm optimistic. I mean, it's just like such a negative industry based on fear and uncertainty and doubt and negativity. And just like, it just does not speak to me. I wanted to get back to something more positive. But this was my first CMO gig. And I was pretty connected to a lot of VCs in Silicon Valley. And I kept thinking, well, they've taken a chance on me. What will it say about me if I give up so quickly, and I don't see it through and don't stay there for the growth? Because I was a big part of the company. I'd hired a bunch of people. I led sales for a while. I led certainly marketing,
mm.
and I was kind of like, in some ways, the calm, mature head of this company. And I kept thinking, what will it say about me if I leave? Because I really wanted to leave, I would say, after about 2 years. But then I thought to myself, I started flipping it around. What will it say about me if I stay? What would it say about me as a person if I don't have the courage to follow my heart, and I try to lean into something when I know they can get somebody who's more passionate about this, who can probably lead the company better than I am? What would it say about me if I stay as a leader? What would it say about my team? What would it say about my reputation in the valley? And I just started flipping it around, and it was probably one of the best decisions. I probably should have made that sooner, but it's how fear can both stop you, but can also motivate you if you look at it from the right way. And I think in any case, you were just acquired by a company. There's the fear of, well, what if they find out? What if they, don't think I've got the skills? But then there's also, maybe you could flip it around and say, well, what if they realize that, I'm actually the best person for the job, and I can do it better than
Yeah,
anybody they've ever said before. They hired us for a reason, or they
yeah.
acquired us for a reason. So there's always two sides to it. I think a lot of times in life we end up erring on the doom and gloom, pessimism side, right? A little bit.
So I didn't have fear at the acquisition. Where the fear came in was when I was asked to step into the leadership role at the acquiring company because the CMO decided that great CMO, so Michael Longdon decided that he needed a break. Like, he had been in high growth companies for like a decade, and that's when I got hit with, like, you know when I was told that he was leaving, and then I got a call from the CEO asking me to step in. That's when imposter syndrome hits you full force. But with Robin, the conversation with Robin, it just, you get to do it. I am, it's more of a positive take on, I could fail. No, I get to experience something awesome. I get to serve a marketing team in a much larger company, and I get to discover and I get to experience what it means to scale at this stage. And the conversation with Robin, since he's been through so many different ones, like I have, it's kind of like this is a new experience. It's like when he bought the one-way ticket to San Francisco, it was all about the experience and how that grows you. So it's not about thinking, oh man, I might screw up. It's the fact that I get to do something pretty amazing. One of the things that came up during the fear interview was like I'm like borderline introvert, so it takes a lot of energy for me to go into like a networking room, which could be weird for people because I do it all the time, right? And I've done keynotes in front of 3,000 people, and I get high anxiety just going to talk to one person that I don't know. And your example is that you flip it. You say, okay, well, this person's not going to hate you. We're all at the same event, right?
Yes.
But maybe you meet somebody that you are always going to talk to, or you create a relationship with somebody that's going to be very meaningful to your life. And that the flip the script thing is very interesting because I actually didn't think about it in that way until you and I talked.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's on my 17th day at WeWork. I was asked to go speak in front of the whole company, 10,000 people. I don't think I've ever been so nervous in my entire life. It was, I've never been, my heartbeat, it was my boss who was supposed to speak, but he always told me when I started, it's like, oh, I'm about to have a baby. If the baby comes early, then, you're going to have to step in. I'm like, yeah, it's not gonna happen. And then it happened. So I had to step in and I was so nervous. But then I also thought to myself, again, flipping it around, well, what if I flip it around? This becomes maybe kind of my audition in some way and my coming out party to the whole
Yeah.
company because it's a big company. I mean, how many people am I really going to meet? They're all going to see me. And I think that one presentation, honestly, because I really leaned into it. I rehearsed and I rehearsed and I rehearsed. I must have given it maybe 40 times in front of a mirror, just over and over. And I was still nervous because I was just like, it's so many people. But afterwards, I ended up becoming the CMO for the whole company. I actually wasn't hired to be the CMO for the whole company at WeWork. I was hired to be the CMO for WeWork Technology, this new thing that they were starting up. They saw me at this event and they're like, this guy's really good. He should be the CMO for the company. I don't know if that's what they say, but I think that it played a big part in it. And it accelerated my position in the company.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's the example of what we talked about before. It's like you and I know a lot of people that have CMO roles, CEOs, like high growth tech. It's very I mean, it's stressful, it's quick, it's fast. Change management's very important. I don't think there's anybody that would say they haven't had imposter syndrome at some point, unless they're a complete sociopath, right? And even sociopaths, I think, have a little bit of fear. But that being said, what we do differently is that we lean into it and use it as fuel to enjoy what we do. And like I said before, if there wasn't chaos and there wasn't that fear, I probably wouldn't enjoy it.
Exactly.
Which at the
Yeah.
fear
I
interview, that's
agree.
not the first thought that came to my mind, which shows
No.
kind of this evolution as we continue to talk about fear and imposter syndrome. It's if you can use it for the positive and practice it. Because for me, I have to practice it. It comes very naturally to you.
The other thought I always have is I'll try anything once. What's the worst that can happen? It comes to
Yeah.
food or eating something or an experience, jumping off a mountain, doing skydiving. Like I'll try anything once, unless it's like crazy dangerous. But I don't mean how often do we really get in crazy dangerous situations? But like,
Right.
what's the worst that can happen? Go for it. If you go try, something new at work. What's the worst that can happen? Either it'll succeed and you'll be like, wow, shit, this works, and you'll learn something new, or it won't, and you'll learn something new as well. And we rarely do we in our work deal with something that's life or death. We're creating PowerPoint and strategy decks and stuff like that. We're not like saving lives. So it's like just go for it. There's this monkey brain that's always trying to stop us.
So reflecting on that conversation, what do you hope listeners take away from the courage and optimism that you heard from Robin?
I I think in general, it's just this idea that everybody has like some imposter syndrome. Like even I mean, you're talking CMO at WeWork, talk about crazy high growth chaos and all that stuff. Like, and he went for it. And I think we talked in the interview about how he used fear for the positive gains, right? Because he's more like cup all the way full. That was my main takeaway. I have always viewed fear and risk taking in more of the pessimistic standpoint. Like you have to do it. You have to take risk in order to succeed. His comments, I think, kind of cater to I get to take risk. I get to buy a one-way ticket to San Francisco. I get to make a speech in front of all of WeWork and eventually get the CMO role because of it. I get to do this and that. And him leaning in constantly. That was my main takeaway, is that you get to take the risk. Stepping into a much larger role, it's not a fear of failure anymore. It's how do I lean in to the experience? It's either going to work or it's not. And I believe I can do the job and my team can do it with me. So no, I don't fear failure, at least in this context. From a career perspective, as it relates to the conversation with Robin, I just don't fear it anymore. It's not even, I don't fear failure. That doesn't mean I'm not scared, because it's a new experience, right? But I think being on, scared's not the right word. It's not a fear of failure. It's being uncomfortable and being okay with being uncomfortable. Like Robin and I talked about, I think before we started the interview, there's a reason why, and I was talking about this today with another CMO, two CMOs. There's a reason why I changed around my room almost all the time when I was a kid. Like I moved the bed, I moved the dresser, I always had to reorganize because I enjoy change and chaos. And I think that realization just shows me that I will always have this being uncomfortable as part of how I exist. And it's not a fear of failure, it's just the joy of being uncomfortable.
You can continue to hear his journey by listening to the following episodes. And I encourage you to listen to each of these and think through, what are your own fears? And how would your life be served by having intentional conversations about the fear that so desperately wants to quiet the greatness that is inside of you? If you're interested in more intentionally exploring your own fear and going on your own self-guided fear journey, download the fear interview that we developed with Nathaniel McGuire. Nathaniel is who did both my fear interview and Kyle's. A link is located in the show notes, or you can also text me, 317-350-8921. Text the word fear to 317-350-8921. And that's how I'll know that you would like a copy of the self-guided fear interview. Thanks for listening.